And you are listening to DNP 102.3 FM. This is Saturday Night Live and Local. Our guest tonight is Sam Hitchcock. Normally, Johnny T does this show, and he's not feeling well today. So I'm Larry Carroll, and I'm going to fill in for him. I'm going to try because Johnny T does a heck of a job with these interviews. Anyway, at this time, I'm going to look over to my left here. Sam Hitchcock's in the studio, and he's got some stories going back from when, as far as he can remember anyway. He's always had a love for music, and he's going to share some of his music stories with us. So, good evening, Sam.
Good evening, Larry. How are you doing?
Real good, real good. So anyway, why don't we start with like some of your first memories of music, like first instrument, that kind of thing, first inspiration?
Well, music has always been very important in my life. Even before I played any instruments, I used to play the 45s that were on my older sister's stereo, and sometimes she got a little upset with me because sometimes I didn't take care of them as well as she did. But I think that's where it started for me, and I think I got my interest in music from my mother. My father, he didn't play any instruments; he just listened to the radio. But my mother, she had played piano, and when I got old enough, then I started playing in the band in school. I played baritone. And I didn't really get into dance band music until I was out of school for a couple of years. As a matter of fact, in 1965, I had graduated and been out of school for a couple of years. When I started took up an interest in guitar, I was working at the Ford Garage in Yorksville, and I bought one of these, I think it was a Montgomery Ward's guitar. It came in the case, and the case had an amplifier built in with it. So it was all in one. You just open the case, take the guitar out, set the case up, turn it on, and plug it in, and there you would go. Didn't go very far with that. I was struggling with that, and so the manager at the Ford Garage where I was working, who was quite a musician himself, told me, he said, why don't you play bass? He said, the strings are bigger and there's two less strings, so maybe you have a little bit of luck with that. So I bought a bass in town here in Dover and an amplifier, and I started playing bass, and that worked out real well. That matter of fact, that was my favorite instrument until I moved to keyboards, and even when I moved to keyboards, after 6 years of playing bass, I kept the bass in the program. I played left-handed keyboard bass, and when I sit down at a keyboard now, it's awkward for me not to be playing the bass notes.
Well, that's interesting because the bass with the four strings, okay, and so you're playing basically rhythm, something similar to like what the drum line is, something like that?
Well, the drums, the kick drum and the bass are run pretty much close together. They're foundation instruments. And so a lot of times when the bass drum is hitting, the bass instrument is hitting too. They kind of complement each other. But I remember the first song I ever played on bass was Peter, Paul, and Mary. What the heck was it? I played a Peter, Paul, and Mary song, and then another song that I played with the off the record was "The Game of Love" by Wayne Fontana and the Mindbenders.
Yeah, I remember that one.
And there was one part in there that I looked forward to. It was about in the middle of the song where the bass would play by itself and go bum 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 bum, and I played that song over and over again just so I could play that part. And then from that point on, I just every song that I started working on, I picked something with an interesting bass part. But the first band I was ever with, I got together with some guys. Actually, the first band I was with, the service director at the Ford Garage was trying to help me get into music. And he told me, he said, hey, he said, there's a band that needs a bass player, and he says, I hate to do this to you because he said they're not really that good. And so I'm not going to tell you the name of them. But it was a polka band. And polkas with bass parts of polka music is pretty easy to play. And so I started playing with this band, and it was a piece of cake. You know, it was very easy.
Was it a paid gig, actual?
Yeah, it was a paid gig.
Paid.
I was making money. You know, I was a paid musician, professional musician. But this guy, this accordion player, he had, it was one of those push-button accordions that didn't have the keys like you'd have with a keyboard. It was push buttons. We used to kid him. We'd say, hey, did you take typing lessons to learn how to play that thing? And every once in a while, one of the buttons would stick. And he'd smack it with the palm of his hand, and then occasionally that button would go flying across the floor, and he'd have to go chase it. So we had a lot of fun with that band. But
did you actually, on the bass, did you teach yourself, or did you get lessons? Or?
I taught myself a little bit, and then Brad, the service director at the Ford garage, he hooked me up with a guy named Bill Whitmer, who was quite a bass player in Denison. I took a few lessons off of him, and then I just pretty much worked on it myself. It wasn't too difficult for me to pick the bass parts out of most of the music. And like I say, 6 years after playing bass, I decided to switch to keyboards. And the reason I did that was because if you're in a band as a bass player and the band breaks up, you're just playing a support instrument. So I wanted to do something that was a lead instrument. So I went back to Brad, and I told him I wanted to play keyboard. So he started teaching me music theory, just basic chord progression. Of course, music theory is based on a piano keyboard. So I started studying a little bit of music theory and using it with the piano keyboard. And that's kind of how I got into playing piano.
Did you get piano lessons? Or?
I took piano lessons way back when I was in school. I hated them. And I got up to the point where my mother told me that if you finish this book of lessons, you can quit. So I dug into it, and I started playing these songs and was doing fairly well with the first book. And when I finished that book, I quit. I should have never done that, because the music that I play now, the piano style that I play now, isn't what people would teach. It's just, what works for me.
Yeah. I think a lot of times, even when I had the music store here and the kids would come in for drum lessons with Bobby, they would want to right away play a song. And Bobby said, you got to learn the basics first. And
Bobby's good. Bobby's great.
And it's tough, when you're young like that. You want to play songs, I don't want to just be playing paradiddles or something, And so I can understand when you're taking lessons, it's not the most exciting thing, learning the basics of it.
Well, Kelly Goodrich, I think, is the one that really influenced me to do the bass. Because when I was starting to play the keyboards, Kelly and I got together, and we were playing at the Rose Room. And, the Rose Room, the best thing I could say about the Rose Room is it was steady money. You play every Friday and Saturday night for as long as you wanted to. And we were a four-piece band. And at one point, two of the guys that were in the band decided that, I was playing bass, Kelly was playing keyboard, then we had a guitar player. No, we had a guitar player, a bass, Kelly was playing drums, and I was doing a little bit of keyboard. So the guitar player and the bass player took off. They wanted to do something a little bit more exciting, so Kelly and I decided to keep practicing together with what we had, the drums and the keyboard, and wait until we could find another guitar and bass player. So we're playing at the Rose Room, and at that time, the bass part that we would play on the keyboard was just hitting one note. In other words, if I'm playing chords in the key of C, we just constantly hit one note of the bass. And then after a while, that got a little bit boring, so we'd maybe do a triad, a bass triad, the three notes of the basic chord. And, the interesting thing was, people were coming up that were in the bar and requesting songs, and we'd tell them we're just practicing, we're not really doing anything, but they'd maybe send a drink up to the stage. So how do you turn that down?
Yeah.
So we started playing requests, and the next thing I knew, Kelly come in and said, "Hey, we got a job next month down at Alpa Lanes." I said, what? I said, doing what? Sweeping the alleys or what? He says, no, playing music. I said, you got to be kidding me. I said, we only know a half dozen songs. So we spent that month working up, trying to put as many songs together as we could. And we worked up, I think, 30 songs, which is not enough for a 3-hour night. But and we went in. We went in at Alpa Lanes with 30 songs. And that was the beginning of the impromptu, Kelly and I, that lasted 5 years. But the funny thing about those first weekends that we'd play, once we'd played our 30 songs, then we had to figure out some way that we could play other ones. So what we did, we just make an announcement, say, hey, somebody requested to hear this song again, whether they did or not. Yeah. And we got through the night that way, and then eventually we learned enough songs that we could play.
All right, you are listening to DNP 102.3. This is Saturday Night Live and Local. I'm Larry Carroll, filling in for Johnny T., who was just a little under the weather. And I'm going to play one of Sam's favorite songs. Every once in a while, we'll throw in some music, some of the music that Sam kind of, from time to time grew up with, or in some bands probably played some of these songs. Anyway, here's something from the James Gang. DNP 102.3 FM. This is Saturday Night Live and Local. I'm Larry Carroll, hosting, substituting for Johnny T., who couldn't quite make it tonight. In studio with me is our special guest tonight, is Sam Hitchcock. And we were sharing some stories, if you just tuned in, about the Rose Room. And we played one of Sam's favorite songs, the James Gang. I understand you played that a few times.
Yes, I did. I played that not at the Rose Room. I played bass on that song when we were at a later band at the Mustang, a popular night spot, and I had played bass on that song. That was a song that a lot of bands likes to play. Matter of fact, that band James Gang had a song before that called Funk 48, but it didn't make near the splash that Funk 49 did.
Yeah.
We were talking
that Rose Room. I'm from New York originally, and so I hear some of these stories about the different venues and different bands and stuff. Where was that Rose Room?
You mean stories of the Rose Room didn't make it to New York?
They didn't make it out to Long Island.
That's amazing. The Rose Room was at the Hotel Lee in downtown New Philadelphia, and I guess back in the 40s, at one day it was a real popular spot. They had some real some name bands in their entertainment, but when we played there, it kind of went downhill. It wasn't.
Not because of you, right?
Well, I hope not. I don't know. Maybe it did. But as I said before, the best thing you could say about the Rose Room was it was a steady place to play on the weekends. And we didn't really learn a whole lot of new songs there. You didn't have to. You just kept playing the same old stuff, and that's what they requested. So, but something that one night, John Cush was the drummer at the time. This is toward the end of our time at the Rose Room. I think John Cush, Kip Kramer, and myself were the three that were there. And Johnny had broken drumsticks. He was playing, and there was two lights that we had shined onto the curtain on the back. One of the right, the lights that would be stage right, went into a back room, and we just kind of turned it up and focused it on that back curtain to give it a little bit of an effect. And on the other side was the women's restroom, and there was a similar light over top of the door there. So we turned that light up, and it wouldn't stay that way. It would fall back down. So I took one of Johnny's broken drumsticks and just very carefully propped that light up so that it would shine on the curtain. And I'm talking to the guys, and I said, we're going to be lucky if that thing lasts the night, if it stays there the whole night. Well, then, we finished out the night, finished out the term there. I went on to play in Mustang for years and several different places. Probably about 15 years later, I was walking down the sidewalk in front of the Hotel Lee, and I looked inside, and Lou Galanga was in there, which was one of the owners. I walked in and I talked to him, and I'm just kind of looking back over the room, reminiscing about, some of the times when we used to play there, and I just happened to glance over the women's restroom there, and I looked, I couldn't believe it. The drumstick was still there 15 years later, which tells you how often they must have dusted. But that was crazy. But when we left the Rose Room, we were getting good crowds there, and the guy who was the manager of the Mustang was named Don Dogweiler. Probably all the musicians that have played any time around this area know Don Dogweiler. He was the manager of the Mustang, and he was concerned that we were drawing too big of a crowd at the Rose Room. I guess on Friday and Saturday nights it was maybe taking some what he felt like was taking some business away from the Mustang. So he came in, listened to us one night, and then he says, why don't you come to the Mustang? We'll stick another, we were three-piece. He said, we'll stick another guitar player with you and, start managing you, putting on a bigger circuit than just the Rose Room. So we took him up on that. We went to the Mustang in 1969, and we were the house band there until toward the end of 71 when I left the band and decided to go to Florida to play music. But
where was the Mustang? Where was that located?
Mustang was out on 39. It was a big red barn. I think the first thing I ever remember the Mustang being called was the White Stallion. And at that time it had miniature golf inside. It had some trampolines outside that were at ground level. It was just kind of like a amusement place. And then after that, I think and some people can probably correct me on this, but after it was the White Stallion, I think is when it changed to the Mustang. Mm-hmm. And that's when there was a group of investors, they called it Doligio Company. And the DO of Doligio was Don Dogweiler, Lee Foster, and Joe Sharon. That's where the Doligio came. But Don was the on-site manager who ran the place. And there was some pretty big name band groups that used to play there. We were the house band, so we played every Sunday night. And you'd get 500-600 people there on a Sunday night.
Now, do you know about when that closed down or when that?
The fire was sometime in the 70s. I don't remember exactly when, but I remember standing there and watching it burn and seeing all the memories go up in the air, and I could feel the heat from it. Mm-hmm. But I think one of the things that John had asked if something about if we had any brushes with any famous people. One time we pulled into the Mustang to practice. And we used to leave our stuff set up on the stage because nobody would bother. And we had key to the place. So we pulled into the parking lot and we could hear music upstairs. And so we figured that's got to be our equipment. So we were upset. We were mad that somebody's up there messing around on our equipment. So we opened the door and went storming up the stairs, and there was the Ohio Express playing on our equipment and playing some of the heaviest blues you ever heard. And so we didn't care. Then it was all right. So we sat there and we listened, and then whenever they finally took a break, we got talking to them. They apologized for being on our equipment because we told them it was ours. And I asked one of the guys, they had I think their hit songs was like Yummy, 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 and Chewy, Chewy, and all this bubble gum stuff that we all hated. And, I asked one of the guys, I said, I can't believe this. I said, you guys are great. I said, you're playing some decent stuff here. I says, how come you play all that other crap? He says, because that's where the money's at. He said, that's what they're paying us to play. He said, we would get money for this stuff.
You're listening to DNP 102.3 FM. This is Saturday Night Live and Local, and our guest tonight is Sam Hitchcock. How about I play a song for the memory of the Mustang? Something from Deep Purple. All right, DNP 102.3 FM, and you are listening to Saturday Night Live and Local. Tonight we have Sam Hitchcock in as our special guest. And first, let me take care of some business here. And you're listening to Saturday Night Live and Local. Johnny T is absent tonight. He's not feeling very well. I'm Larry Carroll. I'm filling in for him. And once again, our special guest, Sam Hitchcock. And we're telling some great stories about the Mustang and about the what was it, the Rose...
The Rose Room.
Okay, but that's not what you said during one of the breaks. So it was the Rose something else.
Oh, yeah. You want me to tell that
Yeah,
story?
go ahead, tell that.
Well, the Rose Room was not, it was kind of a dive when we used to play it, and we used to refer to it as the Rose Dump. And a matter of fact, when I would be talking to my wife, I would refer to it as the Rose Dump, not really thinking about my young kids being within earshot and hearing that. And one day later in time, my kids and I were walking down the street in New Philadelphia, and we were, during broad daylight, we walked by the Rose Room, and the doors were open, looked in, and there was the owner standing there at the bar. So I walked in, and kids came in with me, of course, and we were talking, and just general conversation, chit-chat, and all of a sudden my little girl, Michelle, looked up at me, and she says, "Daddy, is this the Rose Dump?" And I could have crawled under a table.
The kids say the
Oh, I know. You got to be
things,
careful what you say around kids.
So, anyway, how about some more of those stories from like the Mustang and...
Mustang was a very special time in my life. The band that we had there was the Reformation. It was the one that generated from the band that we had at the Rose Room, and Don made good on his promise. He put us on a circuit all over Ohio, playing different places, and of course we were the house band at the Mustang. The favorite songs, some of the groups that we favored the most were Grand Funk Railroad, Three Dog Night, and one of the groups that we all used to like to listen to quite a bit was Vanilla Fudge. Vanilla Fudge was a group that used to take songs that were recorded by other people and make them heavy. I'm very familiar with the Vanilla Fudge. Oh, yeah. I mean, they were...
Long Island. They used to play at the Action House on Long Island, and I saw them a number of times.
Oh, is that right? Yeah. Wow. Well, they, Mark Stein was the keyboard player for the Vanilla Fudge, and I guess he's the musician who introduced the Hammond B3 into rock and roll music. And you had played Smoke on the Water here just a little bit ago. And the interesting thing about that is that the Vanilla Fudge, when they picked one of their songs and played it heavy with, of course, heavy B3 organ sounds, I guess that was quite an inspiration to Deep Purple. And they started using the B3 in a lot of their songs too. Probably the most popular song that I can remember Vanilla Fudge doing was "Keep Me Hanging On." That was an old Supremes number. And just about a month ago, I found out that they were going to be playing at the Tangier in Akron. and also was amazed to find out that 3 of the 4 original members were still with the band. It's Mark Stein, the keyboard player, Vince Martell, the guitar player, and of course Carmen Appice, the drummer. They didn't have Tim Bogert wasn't with them. They said that he retired, but they had another bass player that was every bit as good. And I took my son, Jim Hitchcock, who's a Dover police day shift captain in Dover here, and I also took my sound engineer from the sound company, my chief engineer, Travis Green, who's almost like a son to me. I went with both of them. We went up there and we sat. We had tickets right in front of the stage, and that was one of the greatest concerts that I'd ever been to. And my son, who goes to many concerts, he said it was one of his favorites.
All right, why don't we play some Vanilla Fudge?
Well, do you keep me hanging on in there somewhere?
Let me see. DNP 102.3 FM. This is Saturday Night Live and Local with our guest host tonight is Sam Hitchcock. We also have Vanessa in here taking some pictures for us. Hopefully we'll get them up onto Facebook sometime. Anyway, back to Sam Hitchcock, and we were sharing stories about the Vanilla Fudge and some of your traveling bands. So, you have any road stories?
Yeah, probably the most exciting time I ever had on the road, and this was really on the road, was with Kelly Goodrich. Kelly and I, who had, when we started playing as the Impromptu, because we couldn't find 2 other musicians to play, that thing took off. And I think one of the interesting things, one of the reasons that we were able to get jobs back then was because we were 2-piece. We could give, we were competing with bands that were charging for 4 and 5 pieces, and we're only 2, so we didn't have to have as much money. And but we were able to make the sound full. We both realized that we had to play drums a little bit harder. We had to play keys, put a little bit more in the key parts if we were only 2 pieces, and it seemed to work out real good.
Now, were both of you singers?
Yeah, we both sang. We both played. We both played drums and keyboard, and that was one of the unique things about the Impromptu. When Kelly wanted to play the keyboard, that left me standing there. So I sat down on his drums and started messing around with them. This is still while we were at the Rose Room, and I learned to play acceptable drums while he played the keyboard, and we kept switching back and forth, and it got to the place where we used to get some strange looks when we were in some of the clubs, because people would look one time and maybe I'm sitting on the drums and he's on the keys, and the next time they turn around they're looking and we're in different locations. So that used to kind of throw people for a loop.
Yeah, that is different. And usually you don't see that.
Well, I learned a lot from Kelly. Kelly's quite a musician. He's on cruise ship right now, and he's just an amazing musician. And I owe a lot of what I'm able to do on keys now to Kelly. He was fun to work with. We were on the Holiday Inn circuit for probably, maybe a year and a half. We played out in the Midwest. We played out in Texas. Gallipolis, Cincinnati, and we had a lot of great experiences on the road. One of the times that was kind of the scariest was when we were in South Texas. We got to know some people down there at one of the Holiday Inns, and they talked about, we were only about 110 miles from the Mexican border, and we wanted to go down and get some souvenirs. So this guy that we met in the bar says, "Hey, I'll take you down, no problem. We'll go across, we'll get some souvenirs and come back." So we did that. We drove across the Mexican border, and we got some a sombrero and different things that take back, some blankets and things like that. And when we went to go back across, of course the Border Patrol stopped us, and we were standing off the side, and while they're running a dog through this guy's car, in the trunk and all over, walking over the bags of our stuff, and ripping the back seat out and everything like that. And I turned around to Kelly and I said, I said, if they find drugs in this guy's car, I said, we're probably never going to see daylight again. We'll be in a Mexican prison somewhere. Fortunately, they didn't, though, and we were able to get back across the border and get back to the Holiday Inn for that night, though. But it was kind of scary there for a while.
There's lots of good stories when you're traveling about, huh?
Yeah, there were some good times. When we were on the road, we didn't have the first place we went was Tulsa, Oklahoma, and we had been playing strictly top 40. And when we went in, the lounge was called the Ballroom at the Holiday Inn East, and it was a huge lounge. It would usually on Saturday night we'd have between 800 and 1,000 people in there. Just a huge lounge. And before we played the first time, the manager, his name was Warren Houch, and he sat us down at a table and he says, let me tell you a couple things. He said, these guys that are coming in here, he said, they're cowboys. And he said, they wear the cowboy hat and they don't take them off. And he says, I don't want to tell you guys your business, but he says, we're about 45 miles from Muskogee, Oklahoma. He says, I'm going to tell you, if you guys don't play Okie from Muskogee, he says, these cowboys will run you out of town. So you know what we did? we spent that evening learning Okie from Muskogee. And it wasn't a difficult song. Only has about 3 or 4 chords in it, and it was easy harmony parts. So, and that it was one of the most. We had to play that thing about 3 or 4 times a night on a 5-hour evening job.
So, do you you played also with the Delphian, right?
Yes, I did. When we come back, Kelly and I come back off the road, he decided to get married and stay home. So I went back out as a single. I played at Chillicothe Holiday Inn for a month, and I came back and I played at a place called the Lambrusco Lounge in Zanesville. And then I came back and I played a month, I think a month of December, at the Delphian Inn. Which was a nice job, but, it was getting lonely. It was the 3rd month that I'd played as a single, and it was just kind of lonely. I really didn't enjoy doing the single routine. So one day, Carl Dreer came in, and I said, Carl, drag your drums in here and sit in with me. So he did that, and we had a great time, and that kind of was responsible for starting another 2-piece band that I had called Gemini. Carl and I have been together off and on with the band Gemini for 25 years. And I tell people we lasted longer than most marriages. And we had a lot of great times. Carl is a great guy to work with, and I guess you've had some of
Carl was in here a few weeks back, and I remember him telling stories about that.
Yeah, Carl and I, matter of fact, we may even, he keeps threatening to come down and go over some songs and maybe go out and do a Gemini night once in a while.
Well, I think it would go over.
Well, I would love to do that. So I hope he's serious.
He is. He's a great guy. How about some Grand Funk?
Grand Funk would be great. When we were with the Reformation and played different spots, Grand Funk was, like I say, it was one of the bands that we favored, and we would usually start off with a song called Are You Ready? Now, I've got a special story to tell you about that. We played a high school job in Delphus, Ohio, which is over by Van Wert. Took us 4 hours to get there, and we had no idea what to expect. We're all pretty much wore out by the time we got there. We walked in the gymnasium of this high school, and they had a huge stage right out in the middle of the gymnasium. We set up everything on there, and the gymnasium was full of kids, and we kicked off with that song, Are You Ready? And you'd have thought we were Grand Funk themselves. The kids were throwing themselves on the stage, and all of a sudden that tiredness went away, and we were playing music. So it was a great night.
Well, I didn't seem to find Are You Ready in our library, but how about DNP 102.3 FM? You're listening to Saturday Night Live and Local. Tonight, our guest speaker tonight is Sam Hitchcock. And as I mentioned before, we do have Vanessa in here taking pictures for us. She always does such a great job. And Anyway, next up, let's see, Sam. Let's talk about what happened towards the end of your singing career there.
Well, I had, Carl and I were playing pretty regular, and right about 2003, spring of 2003, I was having some problems, some medical discomfort, and I went to the doctor and found out I had cancer. I had what they called non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. The doctor told me I had about 25% chance of survival, and I was kind of shocked. But he told me that he said I, took all kind of blood tests and everything like that, and he said I'm going to send these to Ohio State. But he said, I don't want to wait till they come back. He said, I'm pretty sure I know what you've got. And he said, with your permission, I would like to hit you with a double dose of chemo as though you were coming back the second time with a remission. And I told him, Doc, I said, hit me with your best shot. I said, give me whatever. So he did. And I had scheduled to practice that night earlier with Carl. And I told him that, and he said, you're not going to be practicing anything. He says, you're going to be flat on your back after I hit you with about 5 hours of this chemo, 5 or 6 hours, something like that. So after that was done, my sister Patty drove me home, and I'm laying on a recliner in the couch, and it just bothered me that I wasn't, we had scheduled practice. And I hadn't said anything to Carl about it. So I got up and went down to Carl's house. My stuff was already sitting there, and I went ahead and we practiced. We put in probably a couple hours. It was difficult. It was difficult to sing because I didn't have much in the way of wind, but we did it anyway. We played a few jobs, and then at one point I was having problems with my throat. It was swelling shut, and the doctor did a tracheotomy on me. He told me if I didn't, he said I would suffocate. So they poked a hole in my throat, and it's left my throat a little bit rough. I think, I don't know if there's scar tissue in my vocal cords or what, but I can't seem to sing quite as high as I used to, and so I just quit playing music. About that same time, I got it into, started a sound company, and I've been doing the sound company ever since. The Travis Green that I mentioned earlier, he's my chief engineer, great kid. And so the sound company kind of took the place of playing music, but recently, I've had the opportunity to sit in with my son a couple times, and he's invited me to play on stage with his band. And so I went ahead and bought a B3, bought another B3. Fit of insanity, and I bought a Kurzweil keyboard that I've been playing probably two or three times a day, and I think I'm going to get back into it again. I don't know how well I'll be able to sing, but I love music, and I've always enjoyed performing, and so we're going to give it another shot.
And so now you're health-wise, you got a clean bill? Yeah,
the doctor said if it didn't come back after 5 years, he said he didn't think it would. And after 10 years, well, actually it's been 12 years now, but the last time I went in, we were discussing it, and he said, no, he said it shouldn't come back. He said, he couldn't believe the recovery, because he said, when you came to me, he said you were dying.
Well, and you know what I think too? Just the fact of you getting up, going to practice, and just carrying on with your life, I think that helps. I do. Plus, I was on a lot of prayer lists. A lot of people put me on prayer lists of churches I didn't belong to, and I believe that was very influential in my life. But what you said, I had to, when you get this kind of news, you have to start thinking about a lot of things, and it didn't really put me in depression, because I had a good life. I raised my kids.
I had a good career. I had a lot of things that a lot of people haven't had in life. So I thought to myself, if this is it, if this is going to be the end of it, I'm going to go out on my feet. So I made arrangements for everything I was involved in to be covered by somebody else if I wasn't there. But then after I did that, I kept going. I would go over to the summer showcase where I was doing the concerts. I'd only be able to get up and announce the show, and then I'd have to go lay down. But I went to the teen center. I wasn't able to really do too much other than sit in my office and watch the kids outside the door. But I think that staying with everything and going as much as I could, I think it really helped a positive attitude.
How did you get started at the teen center? How did that come about?
Well, when I retired at the police department, I'd already been doing the concerts at Tuscarora Park. I'd been doing those since 1999. And Kerry Gardner, who was my boss there, asked me, he said, he knew I was getting close to retirement. He said, we're going to build a new teen center. We had benefactor was Max and Irma Miller, great people. Had supplied the money to build a teen center, and this was going to be a teen center not open just on Saturday nights. It was going to be open every day. And so I thought this was great. I always enjoyed going to the youth center when I was a kid, and so when I retired, I started as the director at the teen center, and I've been there over 15 years, and I love it. Love hanging out with the kids, shooting pool. We built a stage for some of them to develop their musical abilities. We bring some national talent in from time to time for them, for their entertainment, and it's just been a great experience at Tuscarora Park.
And when I was young, out on Long Island, we had a youth center, but we had, I don't know if there was 2 pool tables or just 1 pool table, and a ping pong table, and there was this old jukebox. And it had about 3 good songs on it. But that first thing when I'd go in there is I'd punch those 3 songs over and over and over and over again, because I didn't want anybody playing the other songs, which were junkie songs. But I mean, it was, for a youth center, when you see the park center over here, the teen center there, it's beautiful over there. They did a nice job for the kids there.
Well, one of the things, and where we're talking about music, and one of the things that kind of impresses me about some of the games that have come to be since the teen center was built was Rock Band and Guitar Hero. And, kids have them on their TVs at home, but we put them on the big screen. And we put them through a big sound system that belongs to me. And so they can perform on the stage with the Rock Band or the Guitar Hero just like they're playing in a regular venue.
That's cool.
Or they can sit down and put it on the big screen in front of them, the projection screen. And the thing that I always admired about those 2 games were they didn't play they were playing classic oldies,
right?
Like Deep Purple and some of the good music that your guys are playing on here.
And I noticed, because I DJ, and I would notice kids coming up asking for some of these songs, and it's like, where are they hearing this? And eventually I figured it out. It was on their games.
So those 2, whoever, the wisdom of the people that put those games out, are responsible for, I think, a lot of the youth and a lot of these kids learning some of the good old classic rock and roll songs that were great songs of our era.
You're listening to DNP 102.3 FM. This is Saturday Night Live and Local with our guest tonight, Sam Hitchcock. And take care of a little business here. DNP 102.3 FM, Saturday Night Live and Local. Our special guest tonight is Sam Hitchcock. And right now we're going to get back to our conversations. So let's see. You had some story related to this next song I'm going to play?
Yeah, we were just talking about that a few minutes ago off the air. It's kind of interesting. It's going back way back to the early times, my earlier, younger days when I first started playing music. We had a band. It was really the first band I ever had. It was called the Chancellors, and there was 5 of us. We had 2 guitar players, a sax player, Wayne Roth. Tim Hicks was on the drums, and I played the bass. Mike King guitar, and Mike Ploss was the lead guitar. So we were competing at Uriksville at the Clay Week Battle of the Bands. We hadn't been playing that long, and there were 2 other bands that were in there. One was called the Roving Daytonas. They were great. And there was another band called the New Tones. I think it was Joey Montero's group, and they were great. These 2 bands played rock and roll of that day. And we didn't do that. You know, most of the stuff that we played was what they called standards. You know, we played, for the older groups at the Elks and the Eagles and stuff like that. So we were really out of our league. And I thought, we're going to get skunked here, guys. But we competed anyway, and I think the top prize was $50. We was going to make $10 a piece if we won, which we didn't think we would. So when these guys, the first 2 bands, they're playing some of the heaviest rock of the day, and I'm looking over at the judges, and the judges were older people. They weren't young people. They were older people. And I got an idea. I told Wayne, I said, I think we can maybe pull this thing out of the bag if we play it smart. There's 2 songs that we did, and each band only had 2 songs to play. One of the songs we played was a saxophone feature with Wayne Roth. It was called Tequila, and Wayne did a heck of a job with that. And then the other one was a comedy song that we did called Long Tall Texan. So we did both those songs, and I kept looking over at the judges, and they were tapping their feet and smiling and looking at each other, and we won the talent show. And, of course, the other bands, they were real happy. But in addition to the $50, we were given the opportunity to back up a special entertainer that was performing for the festival that year, and that entertainer's name was Billy Joe Royal. So we didn't know any of his songs. We didn't know any rock and roll songs at all. So we practiced the entire night before that day that we were going to be in the auditorium backing up Billy Joe Royal. We learned all of his songs. I think he had like 5 songs. Down in the Boondocks, I Knew You Win, 3 others. We learned all of his songs. And then when he performed in the Uriksville High School auditorium, we were the band that supported him. And that was great.
Hey, let's play that song for him. This is Billy Joe Royal and Down in the Boondocks. DNP 102.3 FM. This is Saturday Night Live and Local. I'm your host tonight, Larry Carroll. Johnny T usually has this slot, and he was a little under the weather, so I'm kind of filling in. Johnny does a great job, so it's hard to fill those shoes. Anyway, my special guest is Sam Hitchcock, and we've been talking about some stories. We just played that Down in the Boondocks, so that must bring back some memories from that one, huh?
Yeah, that's memories from long time ago. I would like to think that I gained a little bit more abilities after those early days. You know, that's when we got into rock and roll, and we started playing pretty much top 40 at the Mustang. And then when Kelly and I went on the road, that was a great experience. Like I said before, the first job that we had was in Holiday Inn East in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And
how did you find these gigs?
Well, we called a booking agent in Cincinnati, DS Talent, that we had was referred to from another friend who was playing music. And we told them, hey, we got a 2-piece band. We'd like to go on the road. And Don Sheets.
So they just kind of line up a bunch of gigs that way?
A lot of the agencies would book you 2 weeks at a time. But the nice thing about DS Talent is their jobs were open-ended. So in other words, they book you into a spot, and as long as you're happy there and the place is happy with you playing, you can stay as long as you want. We were the whole summer of '75 at the Holiday Inn East, and the only reason we left there is because we wanted to go somewhere else. But while we were out there, the Holiday Inn East was such a busy hotel motel that it was cheaper for them, rather than give us a room, they rented an apartment across the freeway, brand new apartment complex, 2-bedroom apartment, and they put us in there. And it was just like being at home. We had a kitchenette. We went out and bought pots and pans and stuff. We put a phone in with a phone number. We were in a book. We had a swimming pool, a laundry room.
So the Holiday Inn couldn't afford to room you?
It was cheaper. I guess it was cheaper for them to put us in an apartment rather than tie up 2 rooms.
That is kind of funny.
And a maid would come over in a van. A couple of maids come over every Monday in a van, and they would clean the place. And they would leave Kleenex boxes and toilet paper, Palms, Kleenex and toilet paper, and we couldn't use it as fast as they brought it. We kept telling them, you might as well take this back. And they said, no, we're supposed to leave it. So when we left, we took bags full of Kleenex and toilet paper with us. It's crazy. But I think the most embarrassing time I had out there was that they used to give us, just about every place we played, we either get a discount on food or we get a free meal of the day or something. And that's what Tulsa was. They'd give us 1 free meal a day. So I would go into the restaurant, and it's a pretty classy restaurant. There was a big glass wall, and on the other side of the glass wall was a swimming pool, and then on the other side there was rooms in the hotel. I went in one day and sat down. They had these great big tablecloths and cloth napkins and everything real fancy. And I went ahead and got lunch. And of course, I always tuck my napkin down in my belt. And when I was getting ready to leave, after I was done, I got up and started to walk away, and I forgot to take the napkin out of my belt. And what I didn't realize, I already had the tablecloth tucked in my belt. So I cleaned the table off. And everybody in the restaurant thought that was funny. People in the swimming pool were laughing. So that was kind of an embarrassing moment. But I thought, I will never see these people again. So
it just seems, when you drive that far for a gig, that, I just wonder how you can afford to do that, between driving there and living there.
Well, we got paid. We were on salary. We were paid well. And it didn't cost us anything. Our room and board was furnished. We got 1 meal a day, and it didn't cost us for where we were staying. Now, we had to pay for the phone bill. We put the phone in. But no, it was our expenses were paid, and everything that we paid on the road was tax deductible because it was traveling expense. So it worked out very well for us.
Well, the story you're telling about the apartment across the street from the hotel, I'm just wondering, let me play this DNP 102.3 FM. This is Saturday Night Live and Local. Tonight our guest is Sam Hitchcock, who's been telling us some stories. And we were in a hotel, but you weren't allowed to stay in there. They put you across the street in an apartment building. And I just thought that was very amusing. So.
Well, like I say, it was just like being at home. It wasn't uncomfortable at all, because most of the time when we traveled and went into a motel, we had to understand that we couldn't accumulate anything because there was only so much room in the motel room. And it even got to the place where when you went into a motel room, what drawers were going to put, your canned goods were going to be here, little refrigerator be on the top, socks and underwear would be in another drawer, and just everything would, where it was going to be, because there was only so much room. And if we got something else, bought something else, then we might have to get rid of something else to be able to put it in the van and go. Kelly and I, when we were on the road, we each bought motorcycles. I bought a BSA in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. Kelly bought a Honda off of a friend that we knew there, and we used the motorcycles to just kind of drive around and see the neighborhoods and the areas that we were playing in. I had time on my hands to do something extra, and so I started taking flying lessons when I was in Tulsa. And I started the flying in Tulsa, and then when we went from Tulsa, we went down to Kingsville, Texas. I didn't have my license yet, so I went ahead and finished my flying lessons at Corpus Christi International Airport. And my cross-country, my final solo cross-country for my license, I flew out of Corpus Christi to Laredo, Texas, and then down along the Rio Grande River to McAllen, Texas, and then back up along the Gulf of Mexico into Corpus Christi to finish out. And for my check ride, they make us go through all kind of maneuvers. This is after the 6-hour written exam. Frank Hover was the examiner, test examiner.
I don't know how you remember all these names.
Yeah, because half the time I can't remember my own. But anyway, when we were up flying, the part I was worried about was when he was going to put the hood on. They teach you to fly with just the instruments in case you'd fly into a cloud or something, get disoriented. So he put the hood on. I had to put the hood on, and then he would say, okay, go this direction, that direction. He'd just zigzag me all over the sky. And then he said, took the hood off. He says, okay, now take me home. I had no clue. I had no clue where we were at. Mm-hmm. I just looked in the direction and kind of like flipping a coin, picked the direction and headed for it. And there we were, back at the airport.
While you're telling these stories, I just think, I know you on Facebook, and on Facebook you're known for telling stories.
Well, these are all true.
That's what I was just starting to wonder.
Yeah, these are all true.
So, locally, any big stories locally?
Well, I don't know about big stories, but I remember when I was a kid, it was difficult for us to find a place to practice our music because the adults didn't want to listen to it. It was noise to a lot of them. We would set up and practice on my back porch, or we would practice in the parking lot at the Dairy Queen, which the Dairy Queen actually liked that because it would draw a lot of kids in. The kids would buy something at the Dairy Queen. But whenever I retired from the police department to take over as director of the teen center, just shortly after I did that, some of the kids came in and wanted to learn how to play music. And so I thought, we really don't have any place for them to perform. So I went back to our benefactor, Max Miller, who had given us some money to build the teen center, and I told him what the situation was. He said, go out, and he said, get some estimates, and he says, come back, and he said, we'll take care of it. So Max gave us some money to build a stage onto the teen center, and those kids can come in there and they can make all the noise they want. They're not going to offend anybody. And a lot of these kids have honed their talents to the point where they're performing, some of them worldwide. I had one of the kids that used to play in one of the battles of the bands that we had that was playing with a band in Japan. And Facebook.
Was that Ryan?
Yeah.
Yeah, he took lessons from Bobby, too, at CDs and More.
Well, the thing I liked about Ryan is Ryan was into classic rock. When they would come in and play the teen center, they played classic rock. They didn't play the music of the day for the kids. And Ryan Bear he's still a friend. I talked to him, on Facebook, touched base with him on Facebook, but I think the band he was with was called the Water Band. But they were in Japan, and he communicated with me, and that was kind of cool. Yeah. But I wanted to, that was one of the things that I wanted, the memories I had about my youth of not having a place to practice or a place to play our music. And I wanted to make sure that that wasn't facing some of these kids that wanted to play. We've got, I've got a sound company. We run sound. We give them front of house sound better than most of them could afford. So it's kind of like full circle to me.
Well, and that kind of reminds me of this place, with all the volunteers here. When I was growing up, there was no place like this where I could try and be a DJ. And here, right in this town, if there's some kids listening tonight, if you are interested in broadcasting, stop by. Steve Slentz is here in the mornings from 6 until 9, and he can give you information about how you can volunteer, maybe have your own show on a local radio station. It's pretty cool. Well,
I think this station is pretty cool, and a lot of people say that. It's this is a great community anyway, and I say this about not Dover or North Philly individually. The Dover Philly community is basically one huge community separated only by a healthy athletic rivalry, and it's a great area, and it just seems like every time you turn the corner, something new is happening to make it more exciting and better. And this radio station is one of those.
Yeah. Excuse me. We are really very together, the Dover Philly people. Some people live in Philly, but they grew up in Dover. Some people, the opposite way. So.
Oh, yeah. Well, when I was on the police department, where we really recognized the cooperation was with the safety forces. When something was going on in Dover, Philly was over there. When something was going on in Philly, we had backup from Dover. And it's just, the communities work very well together. And I was proud to be a public servant as a policeman. I'm proud to be a public servant on city council. And I'm consider myself a public servant with, doing the free concerts at not only the Tuscarora Park, but at Dover Park. We do the series in the amphitheater there, and it's just a great place to be, and music is a part of so many things in this area that this station just helps augment that.
And you are listening to DNP 102.3 FM. This is Saturday Night Live and Local. DNP 102.3 FM. This is Saturday Night Live and Local. Our guest tonight is Sam Hitchcock. We just listened to the Beatles come together, and it just kind of reminded me that Chuck Berry, in one of his songs, he had, that one line about "Here come old flat top, grooving up slowly." Listen to this little outtake from one of Chuck Berry's songs. That's where the Beatles got it from, was from Chuck Berry. They used to listen to a lot of Chuck Berry and Little Richard. And, oops, you're not on there.
They were trying to mimic what American music was doing at that time, and it came back as an entirely new sound just because of the way they were doing it.
Yeah, they took what they were listening to over here and remanufactured it and launched it over here and invaded the country with it.
Absolutely.
Let me take care of a couple things here. And you are listening to DNP 102.3 FM. This is Saturday Night Live and Local. If you're expecting to hear Johnny T, Johnny was not feeling real well this evening and asked me if I would sit in for him. And I said, why, sure, Johnny. Anyway, our special guest tonight is Sam Hitchcock, and we've been sharing some stories about his musical adventures and about the teen Park Place, the Park Place Club, whatever. What are the
Park Place Teen Center was called.
Yeah, I knew it had some kind of an official name to it.
Yeah, I guess that's it.
So, anyway, what other stories would you like to share with us tonight?
Well, I think I would like to go back to the early days of my being a parent. One of the best decisions I ever made in my life was to be a parent, become a parent. It's gained rewards and pays dividends that are continuing on. Someone once said that our children are the rainbows of life, and the grandchildren are the pot of gold at the end. And boy, that couldn't be any truer. But when my first two biological children were young, music was a very big part of my life during their time because that's when I was playing in the bands. So they were kind of bombarded with music just by the fact of being around me, and I considered that a positive influence on their lives. You know, the music of that day, and my son Jimmy, who was a captain of the day shift in Dover Police Department. He followed me into music, and then later on he followed me into police work. But when he was young, I set him on put him on a set of drums when he was 7 years old. And then when he turned 14 years old, I put him on stage. And he and Kathy Rafe and myself, we had a group called the Generation Gap, and that was because of the age differences between the three of us, and we played for a while, and but Jimmy stuck with it, and he's become quite a musician himself. He started on the drums. He's playing bass now in the band. They call themselves the Half-Fast Band. You have to be careful how you say that. And it's a three-piece band, and I guess I have sat in with him a couple times and going to be doing that again. But he's at
one time Mike Harbaugh, he was in that band.
Who?
Mike Harbaugh.
Yeah, he still is.
That's my nephew.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, on my wife's side.
Okay. Yeah, he's quite a guitar player.
I remember when he was just a little kid, and then next thing you know, he's playing, tinkering with the guitar and stuff, and then I hadn't seen him for quite a while.
Kenny Mesker's a drummer.
Yeah, but then I hadn't seen Mike for a while, and then all of a sudden, next thing I know, he's playing in a band, and I went to see him, and he was really good.
Oh yeah, they have a nice sound, and. I'll be doing some keys with them, so we're kind of looking forward. We're going to be playing the last couple of weekends of this month, and who knows from there. But
that is a cool name, the Half-Assed Band.
Well, I'll tell you how that came about is when Jimmy was playing in the band with me. One of the things we used to say. I say, we'll play anything you want to hear. We say, we don't play songs too slow. We don't play them too fast. We just play them half-fast. And he just kind of took that as I hope you don't get canceled off the air for that.
No, I think we'll be okay.
Okay. But I've been very proud of all my children, but very proud of my son, who has followed me, into music and is still playing music. I think, having music in his life has helped him along the way. It just kind of takes the edge off of life sometimes, especially with some of the things you see on the streets in law enforcement.
Okay, now, as far as like when you played at the Delphian and around those years, was there any other local clubs that competed with them? Because I know
we played all the clubs. Yeah. We played about every place. Carl Drero and I, we played as Gemini for, like I say, 25 years. We've lasted longer than most marriages, and Carl and I have played for many, many wedding receptions. And it really makes me feel good to have somebody come up and say, "Hey, you guys played at our wedding." And of course, my first question is, "Were you guys still together?" And they said, "Well, yes, we are." So I guess we've got a pretty good record of playing successful wedding receptions that seem to last.
Wasn't there a place downtown in Philly, a club? Right near where Robert's Men's Shop is.
Yeah, that was it was the Rose Room.
Okay, that was the Rose Room.
That was the Rose Room, and then later it became, they changed it and be called Wind Chasers. It was under different management. And now I didn't play when it was Wind Chasers. I was a policeman, and we used to handle a lot of the overflow that came out of the bar when it was Wind Chasers. But they had a lot of good entertainment there, though. They had some.
I remember seeing... that hobo guy, Boxcar Willie.
Boxcar Willie?
He played there. He autographed my album and everything.
Well, John Kay and Steppenwolf played there.
Wow. I saw John Kay and Steppenwolf playing at the Island Garden out on Long Island. That was back in the heyday. So.
Yeah, that was kind of a good group. I'm trying to think. I think we played a couple Steppenwolf songs. But yeah, I played. Carl and I played a lot of different places around here. We played a lot of weddings and just a lot of the clubs. And the nice thing about a two-piece band is you can compete with some of the 4- and 5-piece bands and give a club owner a better deal on what they're paying out for entertainment because there are only two pieces. But the nice thing about it is we were putting out, we'd say we're a two-piece band, we put out the music of a 4- and 5-piece band. And we were able to do that with a lot of the electronics that's available today. Plus you had to work harder.
All right, let's play something from the Scorpions. DNP 102.3 FM. This is Saturday Night Live and Local. And if you're just tuning in, we have our special guest tonight is Sam Hitchcock. Johnny T is not with us tonight. He's not feeling very well. And I'm Larry Carroll. I usually have a show on Sunday nights at 6 called The History of Rock. So if you're not doing anything tomorrow night, tune in. Tomorrow night's show, we're going to be featuring music of the Beatles. Anyway, getting back to our special guest, Sam Hitchcock. I know you mentioned playing the drums occasionally and playing the bass and the keyboards. Was there anything else that you play? Or?
Well, when I was in high school, my main instrument was the baritone, and of course the baritone has a mouthpiece and the 3 valves, so it wasn't very difficult to transition into the trumpet. A smaller mouthpiece, but I have a trumpet, and I've played trumpet in different groups that I've been in. I play, I played a little bit of guitar, acoustic guitar. I played a little bit of electric guitar, not a whole lot. I wouldn't call myself a lead player. Played the drums with Kelly for 5 years. Keyboard right now is probably my main instrument, and when I play keyboard, it's very difficult for me to play keyboard without keeping that left hand playing the bass part, because that's what I've done so much of. Now when I play with Jimmy, I have to tie that hand behind my back so I can just play the right hand of the keyboard. But anything, I've played a little bit of harmonica. I've played probably the most right now is that I stick with is the keyboard, because that's the foundation for music theory. So that I don't know that I'll ever venture into anything other than that.
Yeah, when I had my music store, Mike McWilliams did lessons for me on guitar, and Bobby did
Mike was good.
Drum lessons. And I asked Mike one day, I said, what's the hardest instrument to play? And he said, it's the first one. So
right.
I never learned to play the first one. So, but I always loved music, and I always wanted to be involved with it. And the DJ thing came along, and I could figure out which buttons to push and what music to play. So it worked out for me.
Well, you've done an excellent job with that for many years. I mean, that's everybody knows Larry Carroll.
Well, thank you. And then from your music career, then you kind of drifted into sound. How'd that come about?
Well, I was playing when I was hired to start the program at the amphitheater at Tuscarora Park. I was approached by Kerry Gardner once one football game, and I think it was 1977. I was working a football game as a policeman, and he told me that they'd renovated the amphitheater and wanted to know if I would be interested in putting a program together. And, of course, I said, yeah. I said, I'd love to do that. And so they gave me a little bit of a budget and turned it over to me. I come up with the name Summer Showcase and started programming entertainment throughout the summer, from Memorial Day through Labor Day. I went out and got some more sponsors, got different entertainment, and pretty much scheduled all the Sundays. the sound system that they had at the time wasn't adequate, so I wound up, when we started bringing bigger bands in, I wound up bringing my PA system from home, and that worked for a while, and then it got to the place where we just needed a bigger system, a dedicated system. So I went to Kerry with that request. He was able to get some grants. We got some professional sound equipment and started running sound for a lot of the bands that would come in. Then we started getting requests to go out away from the amphitheater for other bands to play in other venues. And so I had to start investing in some of my own equipment to be able to do that. And that's how the sound company got started in 2003, and it has just mushroomed to the point where last year we started doing installations and retail sales. And we do probably about 9 or 10 festivals a year that we run sound. We'll do concert sound, rent systems, just about anything that has to do with music. You want to go down and throw tin cans in the river and want music, I'll set up a sound system for you.
And, it's a natural evolution, from being in a band and working with sound equipment to being out in front of the sound equipment, running sound for the bands. So.
Yeah, that's right. And when I took over the Teen Center as director, it was kind of natural to be able to supply a sound system. It made it easier when I supplied sound system for the bands that would come in. Some of the local bands didn't have adequate sound, so I started supplying for them. And that made it more comfortable for them to play. While they were learning to play their music, we were furnishing them with a good PA system. And I'll never forget, during one particular middle school field trip, a young man came in whose eyes got big around as quarters when he saw the sound equipment. And I started feeding him the manuals and teaching him what I could about it. He took right into it. That young man is 21 years old today. His name is Travis Green, and he is my chief engineer with the sound company. I can send him anywhere with any of the equipment I've got, the biggest system I've got, and he can take care of it. He currently runs sound for the end of summer celebration in Dover. With our biggest system, pumps out 25,000 watts front of house. Does a marvelous job.
And that's right from the Teen Center.
That's from the Teen Center and from the sound company that, that's where he came from. He came from the Teen Center. So I gained another son.
And it sounds like a great place to hang out.
It is, and it's the thing that's different about Park Place, different from what youth centers used to be, that were open Saturday night for a few hours. Park Place is open every day through the week. We open up right after school. Kids come in, they can hang out in a safe environment, get something to eat, play the video games, get on the computer, and believe it or not, a lot of them will sit in the booth and do homework.
And what's the membership charge?
Well, you don't have to be a member to come into Park Place, but membership is $12 a year, a whole dollar a month, and members get one free ramen noodle every day, which they love. They go through those like you won't believe. 12 of those, and they paid for their membership because we have to charge. We'll charge them $1 if they buy one.
Okay. No, that's great. And even when my kids were little and I'd bring them over to the park and they could ride for like 15 cents, they'd get on the merry-go-round for 20 minutes or something. Everything was always relatively inexpensive. And most of the times it was done just enough to support the systems, and they weren't out to make a whole lot of money off of the people.
No, and that's because of RTY, which was a company that was developed out of New Philadelphia Rotary Club when there was an insurance problem back in the mid-'80s. RTY is the not-for-profit management company that operates the majority of the amusements at Tuscarora Park. And they do keep the prices are affordable, and we definitely have a real gem in the community with Tuscarora Park. It is a favorite project of many, many different things with Newfoundland Rotarians. I'm proud to be a Rotarian, and also proud to participate in a lot of the things the good things that go on in Tuscarora Park.
All right, you're listening to DNP 102.3 FM. This is Saturday Night Live and Local, and our guest tonight is Sam Hitchcock. Saturday Night Live and Local, usually Johnny T's here, but he is not feeling well this evening. I'm Larry Carroll sitting in for him. Normally I'm here on Sunday nights, and I'll be here tomorrow at 6 with the history of rock. Tonight we have our guest Sam Hitchcock, and we're getting near the 11 o'clock hour, so we're going to start to wrap it up. I just wanted to ask, your advice to kids today thinking of playing an instrument or getting into a band. What would you say?
Well, I think we have some excellent instructors in the area in the school systems. I know many of them personally, and they try to, will guide, help the kids achieve what they have the talent to do. Whether it be vocal music or instrumental music, I think we're really rich in the area with a lot of the instructors that we have in the school systems. And some of the kids, that's what they want to do. If they want to do concert band or maybe get into dance band or anything like that, I think there are plenty of opportunities. You mentioned Bobby, and there's Dan Gribble that was on here one time. He's an excellent instructor on guitar. We've got a lot of great musicians around here that are willing to share their talents with young people. And music is a happy world. It's a world that will take you out of the blues or take you into the blues if you need to be in the blues. But it seems like, it has always seemed to me that whatever mood I was ever in, whatever was going on in my life, it seemed like there was a song that told the story. And there was always a way to, you could get yourself out of a bad mood by just putting on one of your favorite happy tunes. And, music has been a big influence on my life since I ever knew that music existed. It's been a big influence on my children. And my grandchildren are getting into music now, and I would encourage any young people who have the desire or have any kind of an incentive to have anything to do with music, explore it. Make the effort to follow through on it. I think you'll be happy.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, music is the only universal language that we have. In other words, when you have a sheet music in Russia or China or the United States, it's all the same. It's the only universal thing that we have in mankind.
Music is a universal language, and love is the key.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's all you need. Anyway, we're going to wrap it up. This was Saturday Night Live and Local, and we want to thank Sam Hitchcock for joining us tonight, and Vanessa for taking pictures to record the history of this. And we're going to wrap it up tonight and just say goodnight.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you, Vanessa.
You're welcome.
I've enjoyed it.
You're welcome. Glad to have you here, Sam.